Chapter 2653. If the Flying Star Lien family hadn't attracted some of the great path spirits for them, they would have been in the same predicament as the Flying Star Lien family. However, the Flying Star Lien family had suffered so much that they couldn't hold on any longer. Once they couldn't hold on any longer, the Tianfeng Chu family would be the next unlucky ones. Not only did the Tianfeng Chu family know about this, but the Flying Star Lien family also knew about it. They were lucky to have the upper hand before, but who would have thought that there was such a thing in the depths of the cave? They had been attacked by the Great Path Spirits, and the advantage they had against the Tianfeng Chu family was gone. At this moment, only by cooperating with the Tianfeng Chu family could they get through this crisis and continue to advance into the depths of the cave. Thinking about this, Lien Xingqian forced a great path spirit in front of him away with his sword and scattered the spirit qi that it had transformed into. Then, he looked at Luo Qingtong and said, "Let's cooperate." His voice was sonorous and powerful. He didn't look at Chu Qiankong and the others, nor did he look at Chu Lingfeng. Instead, he looked at Luo Qingtong. This was because he could see that in the Tianfeng Chu family's team, only Luo Qingtong could make the decision and make the Tianfeng Chu family obey her without any objections. This young man controlled most of the mercenary teams, and Chu Lingfeng, as the young master of the Chu family, was willing to listen to her. Plus, the 8th Elder's people. As long as Luo Qingtong agreed to cooperate with him, Chu Qiankong and the others would have to agree even if they didn't want to. Therefore, Lien Xingqian didn't ask anyone but Luo Qingtong. Who would have thought that the person in charge of the Tianfeng Chu family's team was a young mercenary who hadn't even reached the venerable realm? Okay. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes slightly. She was naturally able to see the situation in this battle. The people of the Flying Star Lien family could not be defeated. Otherwise, the people on their side would have to face the full attack of the Dao spirit. Luo Qingtong and the others had just entered the hole. They hadn't even seen the heart of the continent and the Tianluo grass yet. How could the Lien family and the Tianfeng Chu family suffer such heavy casualties? He didn't know what else was in the depths of this hole. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she agreed, without hesitation. Hearing her words, a trace of anger flashed across the faces of Chu Qiankong, Chu Yuanhong, and the others. The Tianfeng Chu family actually needed an outsider to make decisions for them. It was simply hateful. They had lost all face, and Chu Yuqing and the others were even more furious. The latter was almost beaten half to death by him just now. It wasn't until the heart of the continent's last burst of energy that he came back to his senses. He realized that he had fallen into Luo Qingtong's trap. He was a top disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family, yet he had slapped himself in the face and apologized to Luo Qingtong after she threatened him. Not only that, he had even beaten himself to the point of vomiting blood several times. As the saying goes, a scholar can be killed, but not humiliated. What had he been thinking? Why had he agreed to Luo Qingtong's conditions? And why had he beaten himself up to avenge Luo Qingtong? Chu Yuqing's eyes rolled back, and he almost fainted on the spot. If he had known that the heart of the continent was completely open and that the Tianluo grass was at hand, he wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Chapter 2654. Luo Shaoqi, what right do you have to make a decision on behalf of the Tianfeng Chu clan? He shouted angrily. You don't have to agree. I'm sure the Lien clan will be happy to do so. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly. When did Chu Yuqing think this was going to happen? He didn't have to agree, but he would have to lead his people to survive on their own. Luo Qingtong was very happy. Presumably, the Lien clan was thinking the same thing. After all, if the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces were scattered, it would be a good thing for the Lien clan, who had suffered heavy losses. However, Luo Qingtong wasn't ready to divide the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces for the time being. At this time, more people meant more help. She and Yi Qianming would be able to save a lot of effort. Otherwise, why would she pay attention to Chu Yuqing? She would have kicked him out long ago. Hearing this, Chu Yuqing's face instantly froze. He was just making a fuss. Chu Yuqing wasn't stupid. Lian Xingqian had asked Luo Qingtong, which meant that their opinions weren't important. Hateful Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, listen to that bitch. Otherwise, how could they have ended up in this situation? Chu Yuqing gnashed his teeth inwardly. His face was green, red, and white, like a colorful color palette. However, he didn't dare to leave in a huff. Otherwise, if he left the group, he would be tortured to death by the spirits of the Great Tao. It was also impractical to leave this place. Previously, they had refused to leave in every possible way. Now that the cave was surrounded by spirits of the Great Tao, even the way out was blocked. They couldn't leave even if they wanted to. Thinking of this, Chu Yuqing's expression became more and more colorful. Under everyone's gazes, his face turned the color of a pig's liver. Luo Qingtong was too lazy to pay attention to him. Seeing that he was so sullen that he didn't dare to speak, she snorted coldly and said to everyone, "Let's go. We're going to the Lian clan." As soon as she spoke, Yi Qianming brought her forward. Bei Qing, Feng Yu and the others followed closely behind, followed by Chu Lingfeng, Chu Xiaofeng and Gu Yifeng. As soon as the group of people moved, the others could only follow suit. Although Chu Qiankong and the others were not worried, they knew that joining hands with the Lian family of the Flying Star Sector was the best choice right now. Without the lips, the teeth would feel cold. Unless they didn't want the Tian Luo grass anymore. Otherwise, they would have to cooperate with the Lian family of the Flying Star Sector. They were supposed to agree to this, but Lian Xingqian only asked Luo Qingtong, and not them. Did he think that they were inferior to Luo Qingtong? Chu Qiankong and the others felt extremely stifled after being suppressed by a young mercenary who wasn't even a venerate. They weren't much better off than Chu Yuqing. It was just that he didn't fly into a rage like Chu Yuqing. Lian Xingqian and the others were finally able to catch their breath when they met up with the Flying Star Lian family. They had just withstood the endless attacks of the spirits of the Great Tao and were about to collapse. The spirits of the Great Tao also seemed to be very intelligent. When they saw that Luo Qingtong and the others had joined hands with the Lian family of the Flying Star Sector, their attacks became even fiercer. If this continued, Luo Qingtong and the others wouldn't be able to hurt the spirits of the Great Tao, while the latter would be able to continuously injure them. Sooner or later, they would be exhausted and die here. Is there any way? Yi Qianming's expression was indifferent. Chapter 26:55. If someone could perceive the existence of these Great Tao spirits, they would find that the Great Tao spirit dissipated by Yi Qianming seemed to be hidden in the spiritual qi and dissipated into nothingness. But in fact, it was completely killed by Yi Qianming. The man's attack directly injured the source. Even if these Great Tao spirits escaped into the spiritual qi after dissipating, they couldn't escape death. It was completely different from others who simply dissipated those Great Tao spirits. He didn't mean anything else by asking Luo Qingtong. He just thought that this woman had many means and extraordinary abilities. Even if her identity was hidden, she might be able to think of a way to deal with these Great Tao spirits. Of course, it didn't matter if she couldn't think of a way. At worst, he would just have to put in more effort. Yi Qianxian thought so, and suddenly raised his hand to shatter another Great Tao spirit. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were not as efficient as him. However, when the group worked together, they quickly killed the Great Path spirits around them one by one. If someone noticed them during the battle, they would find that the number of Great Tao spirits on their side was the least. And there were fewer and fewer of them. And because these Great Tao spirits were constantly dissipating and manifesting, they were killed by Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others without leaving any traces. No one noticed that something was wrong here. Luo Qingtong heard Yi Qianming's words and nodded subconsciously. Yes, but I don't know if it's effective. Luo Qingtong said and frowned. These Great Tao spirits were originally formed by the power of the Great Tao in the depths of this hole. In this case, even if Luo Qingtong had a pair of blood eyes, it was impossible to see their hidden traces, because they themselves were the spiritual qi. Of course, Luo Qingtong could lock onto them when they first appeared. But even if Luo Qingtong pointed out the place where these Great Tao spirits appeared, by the time everyone's attack hit, these great Tao spirits might have already dissipated. Unless those people could directly lock onto the place where they would appear with their blood eyes like Luo Qingtong and kill them directly. But that was impossible. And Luo Qingtong couldn't reveal her ability, just like that. She narrowed her eyes. After carefully observing these Tao spirits, a vague idea flashed through her mind. However, this idea wasn't mature yet, so she wasn't prepared to say it out loud. She wanted to observe it more carefully. Who would have thought that Yi Qianxian would ask such a question? Yes. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. He nodded and looked at Luo Qingtong. He whispered, "What is it?"
Tell me. Yes.
Thinking of her current identity as Luo Qingtong, who was famous for her meticulous observation, Luo Qingtong was not afraid that Yi Qianxian would find anything wrong with her. She voiced out her thoughts. I'm thinking that since the spirits of the Great Path in the depths of these holes are formed from the power of the Great Path, then would they be afraid of the decaying spirit energy outside? Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, Yi Qianxian's eyes lit up in an instant. He looked at Luo Qingtong. In his eyes, there was an indescribable meaning. This woman was still the same as before. She could see through the essence at a glance. She thought she hid it well. Chapter 26:56. Even if Luo Qingtong didn't expose her identity to Yi Qianxian, she couldn't hide it anymore. However, Yi Qianxian didn't intend to expose Luo Qingtong's identity, so he didn't say anything even if he knew. He just looked at her meaningfully and nodded. You're right. Since these great Tao spirits are formed by the vitality energy, the decaying spiritual energy outside must be their enemy. These great Tao spirits were the power of the great Tao, so they would lead the decaying spiritual energy in and corrode the vitality energy. In this way, these great Tao spirits would have nowhere to hide. As Yi Qianren said this, she immediately ordered Beiqing and Fengyu, who were beside her, go and draw in the decaying spiritual energy from the outside. The vitality energy in the heart of the continent had just erupted, so the decaying spiritual energy outside wouldn't be able to invade so quickly. He had to send people to bring the decaying spiritual energy in. When Beiqing and Fengyu heard this, they didn't say anything and directly rushed to the entrance of the hole. There was a group of great Tao spirits guarding the entrance, but they were no match for Beiqing and Fengyu at all. They were directly killed. Then the group rushed out of the hole. The people from the Lian family and the Tianfeng Chu family didn't know what was going on. They only saw Beiqing and Fengyu rushing out of the hole and thought that they had given up on escaping. However, the other party was too strong. It was impossible for the people from the Flying Star Lian clan and the Heavenly Wind Chu clan to directly disperse the Tao spirits guarding the entrance like they did. Everyone was shocked. As for Chu Yuqing, he laughed in schadenfreude. Haha, Luo Xiaoqi, your bodyguards abandoned you and your employer and ran away. He looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, thinking that Beiqing and Fengyu were the bodyguards hired by Yi Qianxian. From the looks of it, the other party had abandoned the two of them and fled. Chu Yuqing was gloating inwardly, but Luo Qingtong didn't feel like paying him any attention. When Beiqing and Fengyu brought in the decaying spirit qi, he realized that he had made a mistake. At that time, this hole would be filled with decaying spiritual qi. Let's see how he can still smile. In fact, this was indeed the case. If the decaying spirit qi filled the hole, then everyone's attacks would be limited. After all, although the decaying spirit qi didn't harm them, it couldn't replenish their strength. Luo Qingtong knew that the white jade masked man was Yi Qianxian, so she told him her idea. If it had been someone else, she might not have said it. After all, this method was somewhat risky. If they brought in the decaying spirit qi, but it was useless against the great Tao spirits, then they would be in big trouble. With their attacks and power limited, their situation would be even worse than before. Of course, Luo Qingtong didn't care about the existence of the decaying spirit qi. She'd stockpiled countless spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs outside. It was more than enough for Yi Qianxian and the others to replenish their strength. It was the same for Chu Xiaofeng and the others. However, the same couldn't be said for the people from the Lian family and Chu Yuqing. Therefore, she couldn't be bothered to listen to Chu Yuqing's mockery. When Bei Qing and Feng Yu brought in the decaying spirit qi, they'd make him cry. Chapter 26:57. He'd suffered a few losses in front of Luo Qingtong before. Now that he'd finally found a way to regain some face, how could he let it go so easily? But before his mocking laughter could be heard for long, his voice came to an abrupt halt, as if someone had caught it in his throat. You talk too much nonsense. Yi Qianqian's voice was cold. He stared coldly at Chu Yuqing, as if he were looking at a dead man. Chu Yuqing's hair stood on end. He didn't know why, but when Yi Qianren looked at him like this, his heart and even his soul suddenly felt like he was going to die. His heart was in a state of panic, but his expression remained fierce. He yelled, "Who do you think you are?" Before he could finish his sentence, there was a commotion outside the cave.
Boom.
A violent and powerful aura suddenly exploded from the outside. In the next second, streams of decaying spiritual energy suddenly surged in from outside the hole's entrance. The dark gray spirit qi followed behind Beiqing, Feng Yu, and the others as it violently surged into the hole and rushed into it. Seeing this scene, Chu Yuqing's voice was stuck in his throat. He watched as Beiqing, Feng Yu, and the others rushed in from outside the hole. His expression was completely distorted. Bastards, what have you done? You've actually brought in all that decaying spiritual energy. Do you know that this will kill us? Chu Yuqing's voice was extremely shrill. His voice was like a cold owl, piercing through the hole. It was so sharp that it sounded like a demon's voice piercing through one's ears. But he didn't realize it at all. He only looked at the scene outside the hole, flustered and exasperated. He didn't know how Beiqing, Feng Yu, and the others had done it. They'd opened up a path through the spiritual energy outside, forcibly bringing in the decaying spiritual energy that had been blocked outside. Chu Yuqing was practically stamping with rage. When the decaying spirit qi rushed in, they would lose their advantage of not having to worry about exhausting their strength. At that time, wouldn't they all die at the hands of these great Tao spirits? Thinking of this, his expression became extremely ferocious. He almost rushed in front of Luo Qingtong and attacked her. However, before he could do anything, Chu Lingfeng and the others had already stood in front of Luo Qingtong. You are not allowed to touch her. Chu Lingfeng's voice was cold. He didn't care what Luo Qingtong had done. Anyway, in his opinion, whatever Luo Qingtong did was right. Even if the other party wanted his life, he would still do it. The only thing that made him depressed was that his master really shouldn't have abandoned Mingzun. The man in front of her was too hateful. He glared fiercely at Yi Qianxian, then said to Chu Yuqing, "If you dare to touch her, I'll throw you out." If his master hadn't forbidden him from attacking Chu Yuqing and the others, they wouldn't even know how they died. He actually wanted to attack Luo Qingtong. When Chu Yuqing heard Chu Lingfeng's words, he almost fainted. Chu Lingfeng, this idiot. Luo Shaoqi is about to kill all of us, but he still wants to protect her? Does he have a brain? That's right, he's an idiot. There's no such thing as a brain. Chapter 26:58. As soon as he said that, before Chu Qiankong and the others could say anything, Lian Xingqian's voice sounded faintly. She's not trying to kill us. Look carefully. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed in the direction Beiqing, Feng Yu, and the others were coming from. Under their lead, the dark gray decaying spiritual energy behind them surged violently into the hole. Wherever it passed, the spirits of the Great Path, who had gathered again to guard the entrance of the hole, kept retreating in fear, as if they were very afraid of the decaying spiritual energy. Beiqing, Feng Yu, and the others rushed towards them without being stopped at all. On the contrary, the spirits of the Great Path kept retreating. Not only that, they saw one of Beiqing, Feng Yu, and the others shatter a spirit of the Great Path, who was enveloped by the decaying spiritual energy in time, with a punch. Something surprising happened. The great Tao spirit's figure dissipated and turned into invisible spirit qi. However, because it was surrounded by decaying spiritual energy, its spiritual energy couldn't dissipate into the decaying spiritual energy and was forcibly devoured. The decaying spiritual energy was the nemesis of these spirits of the Great Path. When everyone saw this, how could they not understand why Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had led the decaying spiritual energy into the hole? Luo Qingtong wasn't harming them. She was clearly saving them. After all, compared to the harm of not being able to replenish their strength from the decaying spiritual energy, it was more important to be able to kill these spirits of the Great Path that they were almost unable to deal with. Not only that, but they could also continue to move deeper into the hole and obtain the Tianluo grass. This was incomparable to anything else. So, what if they couldn't replenish their strength? Didn't they still have those spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs that they picked from outside? With this thought in mind, how could they blame Luo Qingtong at all? Even Chu Qiankong and the others, who had been angry at the beginning and were ready to attack with Chu Yuqing and the others, no longer had any objections. As for Chu Yuqing, he looked as if he had just been viciously slapped in the face. The expression on his face changed from arrogance, to clamoring, to stamping with rage, and finally to an indescribable embarrassment. Everyone looked at the expression on his face and felt embarrassed for him. From the very beginning, Chu Yuqing had been making things difficult for Luo Qingtong the moment he saw her. Who knew how many times he'd been slapped in the face, but he still didn't get tired of it. He really was a true warrior. The crowd sighed in their hearts. As for Chu Ku and the others, they were gnashing their teeth so hard that their teeth were about to fall off. Previously, they thought that Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to escape punishment this time. What a big crime to bring in that decaying spiritual energy. If they joined forces, they would be able to kill Luo Qingtong. In the end, the situation was reversed. Not only was Luo Qingtong fine, but she was also regarded as the savior of the world. The decaying spirit qi actually had the effect of restraining and killing these great Tao spirits. With the help of the decaying spirit qi, the crowd was no longer helpless against these great Tao spirits. This undoubtedly allowed Luo Qingtong to establish great prestige in front of everyone. Chapter 26:59. Moreover, he would owe her a huge favor. How could such a thing happen to Luo Qingtong? Chu Yufei's heart was filled with hatred. Chu Yuqing, this idiot, he might as well not have said that Luo Qingtong was the one who did it. Great! Now that he had caused a ruckus, he had helped Luo Qingtong expand her prestige. This idiot! Chu Yufei's heart felt like it was being sliced by a knife. She had always boasted that her schemes weren't bad, but Luo Qingtong was better than her in every way. Not only had she ruined her plans several times, she had also stolen the limelight this time. Chu Yufei had always been the object of admiration and protection wherever she went. But first, she had run into a wall with Yi Qianxian, and then Luo Qingtong's radiance had suppressed her to the point that she couldn't even be compared to the background. This was a huge blow to her prideful and vain heart. Fortunately, this Luo Xiaoqi was a man. If it had been a woman, the jealousy and hatred in Chu Yufei's heart was like a poisonous fog, constantly churning in her mind. By the time everyone saw the effects of the dark gray decaying spiritual energy, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had led the dark gray fog to them. This group of people was deliberately delaying. Otherwise, with their strength, how could they have taken so long to rush back to Luo Qingtong's group after the Great Path spirits had been forced to retreat? They had only done this so that everyone could better see the benefits and effects of the dark gray decaying spiritual energy. They had clearly heard Chu Yuqing's mockery earlier. He actually dared to mock their mistress. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others' eyes were cold as they looked in the direction of Chu Yuqing's group. After this matter was over, they would definitely let them know how the word death was written. Young master, it's done. They nodded to Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. She was calling Yi Qianxian, who was also Luo Qingtong's current identity. After all, the girl had not fully recovered her identity yet. Even if Bei Qing, Feng Yu and the others knew that the other party was their mistress, they would not expose Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian's identities at this time. Yes. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent as he responded in a low voice. He looked at the decaying spirit qi that had been attracted by Bei Qing and Feng Yu. At this moment, the decaying spirit qi was rolling and attacking the surrounding life spirit qi. Luo Qingtong and the others were surrounded by the decaying spiritual energy. The spirits of the Great Path that had surrounded them and attacked them were now shrieking and retreating into the depths of the hole. The people of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan finally had a chance to catch their breath. Come on, let's chase after them. Everyone was very excited. Looking at the spirits of the Great Path retreating into the depths of the hole, everyone's breathing became much heavier. If they killed these spirits of the Great Path, wouldn't the Tianluo grass nurtured in the heart of the continent in the depths of the hole belong to them? However, although everyone was very excited, some people still remembered the attack that the Flying Star Lian clan had encountered when they had rushed into the depths of the hole. Who knew what else was in the depths of the hole? If there was another ambush, it was likely that all of them would die here. Therefore, even if some people were clamoring to rush in and kill their way in, they would not be able to escape. Chapter 2660. What do you think, young Master Shaoqi? Should we continue chasing after them? One of the Flying Star Lian family's top disciples asked, his expression extremely respectful. Even his tone was indescribably polite and gentle. It was clear that after this incident, the Flying Star Lian family had thoroughly acknowledged Luo Qingtong's abilities. They valued and trusted her greatly. Not only that, but when they'd asked the youth for help, he'd agreed without hesitation. Chu Yuqing had even made things difficult for him. If not for the youth's agreement, the Flying Star Lian family probably wouldn't have received any help from the Tianfeng Chu clan. Chu Yuqing and the others would definitely have reprimanded and humiliated them in every possible way. By then, not only would the dignity of the Lian family of the Flying Star sector be gone, even the capability of the team would suffer a blow that was even more severe than before. Therefore, the Flying Star Lian family members were extremely grateful to Luo Qingtong. As for Chu Yuqing and the others, they didn't even bother to look at them. In truth, Chu Yuqing had been wrongly accused. He was unhappy that the Flying Star Lian family wanted to ally with the Tianfeng Chu clan, not with them, but with Luo Qingtong. That was why he'd spoken out against Luo Qingtong, not because he wanted to refuse the Flying Star Lian family's alliance. But in that situation, when his words fell on the Flying Star Lian family's ears, they thought he was unwilling to agree to their request for help. Moreover, he didn't allow Luo Qingtong to agree to their request. That was why he'd gotten into a fight with Luo Qingtong. It could be said that this was all a beautiful misunderstanding. If Chu Yuqing knew that his indignant actions had ended up benefiting Luo Qingtong, increasing her standing in the hearts of the Flying Star Lian clan's people, while also harming himself, who knew if he would spit out a mouthful of blood? Luo Qingtong immediately nodded when she heard the Flying Star Lian family's question. We can chase after them. Her blood-red eyes flashed faintly. She didn't see the Dao spirits laying down any ambush in the depths. It was very clear that they were truly afraid of the decaying spiritual qi. They had already completely retreated, shrinking into an even deeper place. All right, the top disciple of the Flying Star Lian family was overjoyed. He then looked at Lian Xingchen beside him. Young master? The latter had just been severely injured while blocking the attacks of those great Dao spirits. Those Dao spirits had come so suddenly that Lian Xingchen had suffered several serious injuries in order to protect the Lian family disciples around him. At this moment, he had just finished bandaging and treating his wounds. When he heard this, he immediately nodded and said, "Listen to little seventh young master. Let's go." As he spoke, he looked deeply at Luo Qingtong. Just now, when they were outside the cave, Luo Qingtong had been forced by Chu Yuqing and the others to ask for his help and respectfully address him as young Lord Lian. Now, the other party was qualified for him to call him little seventh young master. The fate of life was truly peculiar. And this young man's ability was far more complicated than he had imagined. I wonder how much the seventh young master's bodyguards have consumed after going out to draw in the decaying spiritual energy. If you don't mind, the Flying Star Lien family is willing to protect little seventh young master. We can swear an oath to the heavens that we won't harm you in the slightest, nor will we secretly imprison you. When it's time to seize the Tianluo grass, we'll compete fairly with the Tianfeng Chu family. What do you think? Chapter 2661. His eyes were extremely bright. The young man originally had an extremely handsome and noble demeanor, but his steadiness made him even more domineering. His complexion was slightly pale, but the words he spoke were very orderly and sonorous. If it weren't for the fact that Yi Qianxian and the others were by Luo Qingtong's side, she might have really agreed to his request. After all, he had a thorough understanding of the Tianfeng Chu clan situation. Luo Qingtong was currently in the Tianfeng Chu clan's ranks. Although her prestige was very high, the only people under her control were the mercenaries, Chu Lingfeng, and the Eighth Elder's people. Chu Qiankong, Chu Yuqing, and the others were completely unreliable. Not only were they unreliable, but she didn't know when they would seize the opportunity to make a move against her. Under such circumstances, if the people around her were exhausted, it would be better to go to the Feixing Lien clan, who had no grudges with her and owed her a favor. However, by Luo Qingtong's side was Yi Qianxian. In this world, there was no place safer than being by Yi Qianxian's side. Luo Qingtong chuckled. No need. Young Master Lien, just take care of yourself. Naturally, someone will protect me. Her words were ambiguous. Those who didn't know better would think that she was talking about Chu Lingfeng. In reality, only Luo Qingtong knew that she was talking about Yi Qianxian. Of course, that man didn't need to know. She was still hiding her identity. She didn't know that under the white jade mask, Yi Qianxian's lips had already curled up slightly. However, his expression was that of a soft snort. At least this woman was tactful and didn't leave his side again. But why were all these people trying to snatch people away from him? Forget about Chu Lingfeng. What was wrong with this young Master Lien? Did he look so weak that he couldn't even protect this woman? As Yi Qianxian thought about this, he felt extremely displeased. He looked coldly at Lien Xingchen and said, "Young Master Lien, just worry about yourself. The capability of the Lien family of the Flying Star sector is not enough to protect her." While he was talking, the members of the Lien family of the Flying Star sector slightly changed their expressions. Just as someone was about to reprimand him for his audacity, they saw that beside Yi Qianxian, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others suddenly burst forth with extremely powerful energy. LV9 Human Martial Realm, LV9 Human Martial Realm, LV9 Human Martial Realm. All of them were at the 9th level of the Human Martial Realm, which made everyone's complexion change. This was especially true for the Tianfeng Chu family. No one had expected the people behind Yi Qianxian to be so powerful. 9th level of the Human Martial Realm. One had to know that the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan also had guards with such strength, but there were only 1 or 2 of them at most. How could they compare to Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others behind Yi Qianxian, who were all at the 9th level of the Human Martial Realm? The combined strength of all the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan and their LV9 Human Martial Realm experts would only be able to match the strength of the people behind Yi Qianxian. In other words, the strength of Yi Qianxian and his people was enough to match that of the Tianfeng Chu clan or the Lien family of the Flying Star sector. Everyone was stunned. What they didn't know was that this was not the full strength of Yi Qianxian and his people. If they knew the true strength of Yi Qianxian and his people, they would probably faint. Even so, someone was already on the verge of fainting. This person was none other than Chu Yuqing. Chapter 2662. When he saw the strength of Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others, Chu Yuqing's eyes rolled back and he almost fainted. All of them were at the 9th level of the Human Martial Realm. It wasn't that the Tianfeng Chu clan didn't have such a card up their sleeves. However, this wasn't something that Chu Yuqing and the other top disciples could enjoy. Even Chu Lingfeng probably didn't have such qualifications.
Who were these people?
How could they have so many valiant guards? Chu Yuqing was so shocked that he almost fainted. Chu Qiankong and the others also broke out in a cold sweat. They hadn't expected that the mercenaries they'd hired would have experts like Yi Qianxian and the others. Although the Tianfeng mercenary city was a mixed bag of good and bad people, the Tianfeng Chu clan had left so suddenly that they hadn't had time to screen out those who remained in the city. It was inevitable that some people would sneak into their mercenaries. However, they hadn't expected Yi Qianxian and the others to be as strong as they were. It was inconceivable that someone with such strength would appear in Mercenary City. While everyone was stunned, the Flying Star Lian clan members were also at a loss for words. When Yi Qianxian had said that the Flying Star Lian clan might not be able to protect Luo Qingtong, they'd thought that he was just boasting and had been about to reprimand him. However, now that he'd shown them his strength, they had nothing to say in response. Given the strength that Yi Qianxian and the others had displayed, unless they joined forces with the Tianfeng Chu clan, they definitely wouldn't be a match for them. As for Yi Qianren and the others, it was obvious that they were neutral. Compared to the Flying Star Lian clan, which had a conflict of interest with the Tianfeng Chu clan and wasn't familiar with Luo Qingtong, Yi Qianxian and the others, who were familiar with Luo Qingtong, were more suited to protect Luo Qingtong. As for the latter, he believed that they trusted them more. Lian Xingchen didn't say anything else. He nodded at Luo Qingtong and said in a low voice, "That's good too. With someone protecting Little Seventh, we can be at ease." His expression was calm, and there was nothing wrong with it. In fact, what he said was exactly what he was thinking. The reason why he wanted to bring Luo Qingtong to the Lian family of the Flying Star sector was that he was worried that Yi Qianxian and the others would be too exhausted to protect Luo Qingtong, which could lead to accidents in the upcoming danger. At that time, they would be in trouble. After all, Luo Qingtong's ability was indispensable to them. Now that Yi Qianxian and the others had revealed their strength, it proved that they had the qualifications to protect Luo Qingtong. Moreover, they were clearly neutral between the two parties. To be honest, Lian Xingchen was happy to see this. After all, Chu Lingfeng had a conflict with the other party before. Wasn't that the case? As the head of the Flying Star Lian clan, Lian Xingchen didn't want to see Luo Qingtong side with the Chu clan. Chu Yuqing and the others were bent on courting death, which was a good thing, but the remaining Chu Lingfeng was stubborn and straightforward, and only cared about Luo Shaoqi. That would be troublesome. Fortunately, he had offended the man with the white jade mask. Luo Shaoqi was stuck in the middle and would probably choose not to side with either side. It seemed that the situation was in the Flying Star Lian clan's favor. With this thought in mind, Lian Xingchen smiled and did not say anything else. The group swept into the depths of the cave. The Tao spirits had already retreated to an unknown distance. Chapter 26:63. They led the decaying spirit energy into the depths of the hole. None of the great Tao spirits that appeared before them could resist the invasion of the decaying spirit energy. If they couldn't escape into their vitality spirit energy, they would die. The people of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan worked together and easily killed them in the decaying spiritual qi. However, they had also consumed a lot of energy. Without the vitality spirit energy to replenish their strength, they couldn't use it. They could only rely on the spirit flowers and spirit herbs they had picked from outside to replenish their strength and strength. Among them, Chu Xiaofeng, Gu Yifeng, and the others were the most eye-catching. The top disciples naturally didn't lack spirit flowers and spirit herbs, and so did Xing Chun and the others. But for the ordinary disciples below, it was barely satisfactory. Some of them only had a few pitiful stalks of spirit flowers and spirit herbs. However, Chu Xiaofeng and the others were different. He and the other mercenaries took out a large number of spirit flowers and spirit herbs and poured them into their mouths without hesitation as soon as their strength was depleted. the Tianfeng Chu clan's ordinary disciples, and the Flying Star Lian clan's people were stunned. They were all very careful and calculated the amount of spirit energy they absorbed from the spirit flowers and spirit herbs. They didn't dare to pour the spirit energy into their mouths until their strength was almost depleted. In contrast, Chu Xiaofeng and the others' actions were simply insane. Everyone deeply suspected that there was a treasure trove in the abandoned continent that was full of spirit flowers and spirit herbs and wasn't guarded by high-level magical beasts. Chu Xiaofeng and the others happened to have found such a treasure trove. Otherwise, how could they explain their crazy behavior? They didn't treat the spirit flowers and spirit herbs as spirit flowers and spirit herbs at all. One had to know that if they consumed the spirit flowers and spirit herbs too quickly, Chu Xiaofeng and the others might not be able to fight by the time they reached the heart of the continent. There was no way they didn't know this, right? Everyone was dumbfounded. Chu Jingyi originally wanted to remind Chu Xiaofeng and the others. However, he had only taken a step forward, and before he could speak, he heard Chu Xiaofeng say, "Oh, cousin, do you have a lot of spirit flowers and spirit herbs? I still have a lot here. Feel free to use them." As he spoke, he took out a bunch of spirit herbs and stuffed them into Chu Jingyi's hands. These spiritual grasses were naturally collected by Chu Xiaofeng and Luo Qingtong when they were setting up camp. They had stayed in the abandoned continent for so many days. In addition to the first few days, they needed to work on their cooperation. For the next few days, they cleared the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs nearby at a terrifying speed. Their madness could almost be described as plucking feathers from wild geese. The group had accumulated a lot of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. If he didn't use it now, when would he use it? One had to know that once one's strength was depleted, it would be very easy for one to be attacked and in danger if one did not replenish it in time. Those great Dao spirits were not completely killed. Instead, they disappeared. Who knew if they would pounce on them and kill them? Therefore, even though Chu Xiaofeng cherished the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs in his possession very much, he did not hesitate to use them. After all, his life was more important. As for Chu Jingyi, he had a very good relationship with him, and the latter had always protected him. Chapter 26:64. Chu Jingyi held the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs with a dazed and complicated expression. Was he being taken care of by his little cousin who had been protecting him all this time? For some inexplicable reason, he felt as if his son had just grown up, didn't he? However, her little cousin had too many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Chu Jingyi watched Chu Xiaofeng take out a large number of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs from his storage ring and couldn't help but ask, "Little cousin, where did you get so many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs?" Could it be that it was really as they thought? That they had found a treasured land with an abundance of spiritual flowers and spiritual grasses? However, just as he was thinking this, he heard Chu Xiaofeng say, "Of course it was Luo Shaoqi who helped us get it. Her observation skills are very good. Cousin, you don't know how great it was to deal with those magical beasts with her. Our spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs were so plentiful that my hands went numb." Chu Xiaofeng said with a proud face. He was secretly glad that he had chosen the Red Flame mercenary group. If not for this, Luo Qingtong wouldn't have been in his team. How could he have so many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs for him to use? Looking at the envious and jealous gazes of the people around him, Chu Xiaofeng couldn't help but say his words loudly. Especially when facing Chu Yuqing and the others, he wanted them to hear him,
so that they would know what they had missed.
Since they dared to offend Luo Shaoqi, they deserved to be careful later. Chu Yuqing and the others' faces turned green when they heard this. Chu Yufei, and the others were fine. They had gone to kill those 1,000 silkworms with Chu Xiaofeng and the others. Although they hadn't directly taken action, they had seen how Luo Qingtong dealt with those 1,000 silkworms. If Luo Qingtong always had such an ability, then it was no wonder she helped Chu Xiaofeng and the others get so many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. After all, the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs they had snatched from Luo Qingtong, and the others were obtained from the Thousand Silkworms territory. Although those were beast-luring grass, it also proved that Luo Qingtong had the opportunity and ability to obtain the same amount of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. As for Chu Yuqing, Chu Hanyu, and the others, their hearts were in a strange state. When they saw Chu Xiaofeng and the others using the spirit flowers and spirit herbs with all their might, they were secretly mocking them for their unrestrained usage. Once they reached the heart of the continent, they would be in for a miserable time. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiaofeng and the others would have so many spiritual flowers and herbs on them? They might even have more than they had on them. This made them feel like they had been slapped in the face. After all, who were Chu Xiaofeng and the others? They were just ordinary disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan and even some mercenaries, but they had more spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs than the top disciples of the Tianfeng clan. Wouldn't they be suppressed by them? Chu Yuqing and the others had never felt so stifled before. They were proud of the fact that their cultivation resources were above everyone else's. At this moment, this capital was pressed down by Luo Qingtong. There was nothing more infuriating than this. However, because of Luo Qingtong's existence, they couldn't make Gu Yifeng and the others hand over their spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Otherwise, even if they couldn't touch Chu Xiaofeng's spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs, they could snatch Gu Yifeng's spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. What could these mercenaries do to them? Chapter 26:65. But now, they could only grit their teeth and watch as Gu Yifeng and the others wantonly used those spirit flowers and herbs, while they couldn't even get a single strand of hair. How infuriating! Chu Yuqing gnashed his teeth inwardly. If he'd known earlier that this Luo Shaoqi was so useful and strange, he would have long ago brought her to his side. He would have squeezed her dry, then killed her. That way, he wouldn't have landed himself in such an embarrassing situation. At that time, she might not have the protection of that white jade masked man and Xu Lingfeng. Chu Yuqing was filled with resentment as he thought of this. He couldn't vent his anger on Luo Qingtong, so he turned to curse Chu Ku-er and Chu Yufei, blaming them for not warning him of Luo Qingtong's power. Why didn't you tell me that she had the ability to obtain such spirit flowers and herbs? His expression was cold and harsh, and he didn't listen to Chu Ku-er and Chu Yufei's explanations at all. He only wanted to teach them a lesson. He completely vented his anger on them. Chu Ku-er and Chu Yufei hadn't expected that they would be the unlucky ones in the end. Chu Yufei's gentle and charming figure and deep scheming were also useless at this moment. In his anger, Chu Yuqing couldn't be bothered to listen to her pretentious words. This was the fate of those who flaunted their beauty and were full of schemes. When a man was happy, he would treat you like a plaything and tease you whenever he wanted. When he was unhappy, who did you think you were? If Chu Yufei was the real first young miss of the Chu family, it would have been fine, but she wasn't. Chu Yuqing couldn't be bothered to give her any face. If it weren't for the Ninth Elder's faction and Bai Xing's strength and influence as Madame Xing, Chu Yuqing would have thrown her out of the group. Chu Yuqing and the others were causing a ruckus, but Luo Qingtong didn't notice at all. Her attention was completely focused on the depths of the cave in front of her. Perhaps it was because they were getting closer and closer to the depths, but the fog inside was getting thicker and thicker. The vitality and spiritual energy was becoming denser and denser. Luo Qingtong's bloodshot eyes made it difficult for her to see the scene inside. After all, it was the heart of the continent, which was filled with the power of the Great Tao. Currently, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes were still unable to see through it, especially when they were so far apart. However, as everyone's journey progressed, Luo Qingtong felt a strong sense of danger in her heart. Everyone, be careful. Just as the sense of danger reached its peak, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes suddenly saw a huge black figure leaping out from the depths of the hole in front of them and rushing towards them. Humph, you're just exaggerating. Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with displeasure as he lectured Chu Ku-er and the others. When he heard Luo Qingtong's sudden shout, he jumped in fright. He then raised his head and looked into the depths of the cave. It was filled with smoke, and there was no movement at all. He immediately snorted with disdain. However, as soon as he said this, there was a swoosh and a furious roar. In an instant, huge figures leaped out from the depths of the smoke and fog. The extremely dense vitality and spiritual energy violently washed over them. Then, as these figures leapt out, it suddenly scattered in all directions, revealing a huge cave in front of them. Chapter 2666. The Heart of the Continent. At the top of the mountain in the huge cave, there was a huge ball of light that was pulsating violently, as if it was alive. Countless mountains, rivers, forests, and trees flashed quietly in it. Many of the people present were very familiar with these scenes. It was not because of anything else, but because it was the terrain of the abandoned continent. What was flashing in this ball of light was the scene of the abandoned continent. This was the heart of the continent hidden deep in the ground of the abandoned continent. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in shock. They saw that the huge cave was a natural underground cave. Because it was separated from the ground, it had evolved into a different ecology and appearance. Trees, mountains, rivers, and everything else was there. When they looked up, they couldn't see the top at all. They didn't know how deep they were underground. The only thing they could be sure of was that they had reached the heart of the continent. While everyone's eyes were filled with surprise and shock, the roar of beasts and the sound of wind came from all directions. Everyone was shocked to realize that there was a terrible danger in front of them along with the cave. Roar! An extremely arrogant roar sounded, with a natural pressure of the great path. It was almost deafening as it rushed toward the crowd. In the next second, a guard at LV6 of the human martial realm who was standing on the periphery was pushed to the ground by an extremely huge figure. Then, in an instant, his body was torn into pieces by an irresistible force.
Ah!
A shrill scream rang out. He had broken through to the 6th level of the Mortal Chi layer and was responsible for the safety of the Chu clan. He was much stronger than an ordinary cultivator of the 6th level of the Mortal Chi layer. However, just like that, he had been killed by a pair of gigantic claws. Not only that, but in the next second his body was put into a huge mouth. Then, there was a crunching sound that made people's teeth ache. Countless spit and blood splattered. The air was filled with a strong smell of blood. This guard at LV6 of the human martial realm had died without a complete corpse. Spirit Beast. Looking at the mountainous beast in front of them and sensing the pressure of the great Tao emanating from it, the expressions of the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan instantly darkened. Spiritual beasts were separated from demonic beasts by a single word, and were also separated from demonic beasts by a single word. The meanings they represented were completely different. To put it simply, anything with the word spirit was naturally compatible with the power of the Great Path. They could borrow the power of the Great Path to cultivate on their own. Like humans, they could constantly improve and transform themselves. When a spirit beast cultivated to a high level, it could even possess the same power as a divine beast. However, spirit beasts were rare in this world. Not every demonic beast could comprehend the power of the Great Path and cultivate to transform themselves like humans. This required a certain amount of luck and comprehension of the Great Tao. However, at this moment, there were no less than 10 spiritual beasts in front of everyone. Furthermore, this was because this place was not spacious enough and could barely accommodate 10 spirit beasts. Otherwise, there would be more than 10 of them rushing in. Luo Qingtong could even hear the roars of beasts coming from the cave in front of them. Obviously, the number of spirit beasts here was no less than the Great Path spirits from before. Chapter 2667. Luo Qingtong's eyes were indescribably solemn as she watched the spirit beasts roaring and pouncing towards them. She shouted to everyone, "Quick, let's charge over." The cave here was narrow and wouldn't be of any benefit to them in dealing with those spirit beasts. On the contrary, they had a large number of people and would be easily injured in the process. Their hands and feet would be tied, and they would be easily killed by these spirit beasts. Once the spirit beasts cut off their path of retreat, they would be trapped in the hole. In that case, they might as well charge towards the cave where the heart of the continent was located. At least, although there were many spirit beasts there, the place was spacious enough. They could gather together and hold them off for a while. After all, these spirit beasts were only at the human martial realm, just like the great Tao spirits from before. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong and the others wouldn't even have a chance to struggle. However, the appearance of these spirit beasts was just like the great Tao spirits from before. It was extremely inconceivable. Spirit beasts were very rare in this world, and it would be amazing if one could appear normally. However, there were so many of them here. Although their strength wasn't very tyrannical, it showed that this place was different from the rest. Thinking about the difference in the energy tide that she saw previously and the various abnormalities in this cave, Luo Qingtong couldn't help but wonder if this had something to do with the strange treasure that she had previously suspected. Was it because of the existence of that strange treasure that these great Tao spirits and spirit beasts appeared in a group? While Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, everyone had already listened to her and rushed towards the cave ahead. Yi Qianxian and the others were at the front. In fact, before she spoke, Yi Qianxian saw the spirit beasts rushing into the cave and immediately led her, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others to the entrance of the cave ahead. When he rose, Luo Qingtong's voice sounded, so the others were slower by a beat. Lian Xing and the others reacted quickly as well. Although the appearance of many spirit beasts surprised him, the appearance of the Great Path Spirit had given him a base. Therefore, even though he was surprised, he didn't hesitate to deal with it. Almost at the same time as Luo Qingtong's voice rang out, he also ordered the people of the Lian clan of the Flying Star Realm to follow Luo Qingtong and the others into the cave ahead. Amongst them, the most chaotic were the people from the Heavenly Wind Chu clan. As soon as Luo Qingtong's voice rang out, Chu Yuqing and the others immediately began to shriek. How can this be? There are more spirit beasts there. Is Luo Xiaoqi trying to get us all killed by making such a decision? So she can monopolize the Tianluo grass in the heart of the continent. Chu Ku'er's voice was extremely sharp. Among everyone's voices, her voice was the sharpest and most hysterical. She had just been taught a lesson by Chu Yuqing, so her entire body was brimming with the desire to find trouble with someone and vent her viciousness. However, as soon as she spoke, she was despised by Chu Jingyi and the others. If that's what you think, then don't follow us later. Chapter 26:68. Once we're surrounded by them, we'll have no choice but to surrender. These spirit beasts can continuously surround and kill us. Do you have the energy and strength to fight them in a war of attrition? Chu Xiaofeng's voice sounded disdainfully. You're really stupid. No wonder you caused the death of all the people around you. His words instantly poked Chu Ku'er's sore spot. She immediately flew into a rage and shouted, Shut up. You're just a dog under Luo Xiaoqi's feet. Chu Xiaofeng, you're a descendant of our Tianfeng Chu family. You do whatever Luo Xiaoqi says. Don't you have any shame? Even if we'll be exhausted to death by these spirit beasts here, won't it be the same once we enter the cave? There are even more spirit beasts inside. Chu Ku'er screamed as if she had gone crazy. Chu Xiaofeng looked at her as if he was looking at a lunatic. I'm too lazy to talk to you. Follow me if you want to. Besides, what's wrong with being a dog? If you had the ability to save our lives with just a word like Luo Xiaoqi, I would also be a dog under your feet. Unfortunately, you don't, Chu Xiaofeng said mockingly. He wasn't like Chu Jingyi, who had to worry about his demeanor as a top descendant and couldn't say many things. He just had to say it. He wanted to anger Chu Ku'er to death. Oh, right, if you want to say that listening to Luo Xiaoqi is like being a dog under her feet, it seems like you guys are too. After all, you listened to her and walked forward, didn't you? As Chu Xiaofeng said this, he immediately sneered and rushed forward with Chu Jingyi and the others. He couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Chu Ku'er. The latter's expression changed greatly. When she heard Chu Xiaofeng's last words, she hurriedly looked at Chu Yuqing beside her and said anxiously, "Big brother, don't listen to his nonsense." "That's not what I meant. I didn't mean that listening to Luo Shaoqi's words would make you her dog." Chu Ku'er's words became more and more anxious, and in the end, she was a little incoherent. She had just been taught a lesson by Chu Yuqing, and now was the time to be afraid. Chu Yuqing's face darkened as he looked at his sister, who was incapable of accomplishing anything but good at ruining things. He couldn't help but slap her across the face. "Then what do you mean? Idiot!" With just one sentence, he scolded everyone present. Did she have a pig brain? Of all the things she could use to attack Luo Shaoqi, she had to use the fact that Chu Xiaofeng listened to her. Stupid beyond compare. Chu Qiankong and the others also looked at Chu Ku'er with ice-cold gazes. No one would be happy to be called a dog under Luo Qingtong's feet. To a certain extent, they had listened to Luo Qingtong's words. If you don't have the ability, don't blame others for being stupid. Chu Ku'er, although there are more spirit beasts in that cave, there are also more places for us to hide and use. Moreover, the heart of the continent is there. Perhaps we can use the heart of the continent to avoid and eliminate these spirit beasts. It's better than being surrounded and killed by these spirit beasts. If you want to throw away your life here, we won't stop you. If you want to be stupid here, we won't stop you either. But don't take us with you. Chapter 26-69. After Chu Qiankong said this, he leaped up with Chu Yuanhong and the others towards the entrance of the cave. Hearing his words, Chu Ku'er's face was filled with unspeakable shame and anger. She was originally very unconvinced, thinking that she had been framed by Chu Xiaofeng and that no one knew her painstaking efforts. Therefore, when she was slapped by Chu Yuqing, she wanted to cry and make a scene. She wanted to let everyone know that she had said the wrong thing for their own good. But now, when Chu Qiankong spoke, she didn't know what to say. All the words were stuck in her throat. Luo Shaoqi was actually right. Then why had she caused such a ruckus for so long? Wasn't that just a clown? Not only had she been beaten by Chu Yuqing, but she had also offended Chu Qiankong and the others. When Chu Ku'er thought of this, her face turned pale and red. It was extremely unsightly. Chu Tianming and the others also had the same expression. They had just been hooting, saying that Luo Qingtong wanted to kill them. But now, they didn't even dare to fart. As for Chu Yuqing, Chu Hanyu and the others, their faces were gloomy as they led their own people to follow Chu Qiankong and the others. They had made them lose face this time, but they couldn't blame anyone else for this. They hadn't seen through Luo Shaoqi's intentions. If they really stayed here and didn't leave, then what awaited them was certain death. They couldn't even escape. Under the pursuit of those spirit beasts, without the help of Luo Qingtong, Chu Qiankong, and the Flying Star Lian family, they wouldn't be able to run far before those spirit beasts caught up to them. How could they dare to stay here any longer? The group rushed towards the entrance of the cave. The 10 spirit beasts that had rushed into the cave saw Luo Qingtong and the others rush towards the cave and immediately rushed to intercept them. If not for this, Chu Yuqing and the others would have been torn to shreds by those spirit beasts countless times over.
Boom.
Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others worked together to blast away a spirit beast. Because they had already revealed the strength of the 9th level of the mortal martial realm, and they were fighting together, no one doubted that there was anything wrong with them being able to expel a spirit beast so quickly. On the Lian family side, Lian Xingqian and the other top disciples of the Flying Star Lian family gathered together and used the Lian family's secret amplification technique. Together with the human martial realm experts around them, they also blasted a spirit beast away. Chu Lingfeng's side was the most shocking. His body was surrounded by an extremely powerful and terrifying force. The veins on his body were bulging, as if they were about to explode. He hugged a spirit beast that was about to bite them and threw it away with a wave of his hand. Roar! As for the little snowball, It had been obediently staying by his side all this time. But this time, it let out a roar and charged out. With a flick of its fluffy tail, it tangled with another spirit beast that was charging at it. Then, under the other people's attacks, it fiercely bit off the head of the spirit beast. Since then, all 4 spirit beasts had fallen at the hands of Luo Qingtong and the others. With this, the passage leading to the cave was opened. Chapter 2670. When they were in the cave, the scene inside was even more shocking. It was as if this was a world that was no different from the abandoned continent on the surface. The only difference was that one was underground and the other was on the surface. Perhaps it had sensed the appearance of Luo Qingtong and the others, but the heart of the continent at the top of the mountain jumped even more violently. The mountains and rivers inside were constantly changing and moving. Luo Qingtong looked at the huge jumping mass of light. She didn't know why, but she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if she had seen such a scene somewhere before. This sense of familiarity was exactly the same as when Luo Qingtong had seen the tide of power erupt from the heart of the continent. Luo Qingtong had also felt that it was very familiar, but because she couldn't grasp that fleeting feeling in her heart, she didn't think much about it. Now this strange feeling came again. But before coming to the abandoned continent, Luo Qingtong had never been to any other continent. Not to mention seeing the heart of the continent hidden in the Earth's core. Wait, as Luo Qingtong thought of this, her heart suddenly jumped. She looked at the violently jumping mass of light at the top of the mountain and finally knew where this strange sense of familiarity came from. She had never been to any other continent. But in the true Spill continent, she had seen such a jumping mass of light. Little dumpling? Luo Qingtong exclaimed in her heart. Looking at this jumping mass of light, the more she looked, the more she felt that it was similar to when she had seen the little realm beast before it had hatched. But at that time, that little dumpling had been in an egg-shaped mass of light, and it was indeed an egg. In the end, the little realm beast had hatched. The shape of the heart of the continent was a scattered ball of light, like a cloud. The two gave off completely different feelings. But Luo Qingtong was sure that there must be some connection between the two. Could it be that the massive light that had hatched the little realm beast was actually the heart of the true Spill continent? As Luo Qingtong was thinking, she suddenly heard a voice in her mind. Of course, the realm beast is the incarnation of the origin. It can transform into an existence of a world. The only place that can hatch it is the heart of the continent that contains the great Tao of the world. Otherwise, where would it hatch from? But that little dumpling from before was also strange. It is reasonable to say that a low-level heart of the continent wouldn't be used as a place to hatch a realm beast. I don't know how it ran in there. As soon as it said this, Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows. This little realm little Luo Qingtong finally. Hee, master, is it that one day without seeing me feels like 3 years? Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong's Luo Qingtong's Luo. The power of the Great Path was extremely beneficial to it. At this moment, the power in its body had completely recovered. That's right. It said to Luo Qingtong, hurry up and put that little dumpling in the place where the power of the Great Tao is the strongest. This will be good for its recovery. That little guy was born in the heart of the continent. It can absorb a lot of the power of the origin from the power of the Great Tao. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed. Chapter 2671. Little Pig was stunned by Luo Qingtong's words. If that's the case, then it can recover at least half of its strength. But that also depends on the level of the heart of the continent. Little Pig said. After all, if the level of the heart of the continent is too low, like the true Spill continent, then it's not necessarily the case. One had to know that Xiao Tuanzi had stayed in the land of the fallen immortals for a long time. It had barely accumulated enough strength to be born. It was basically impossible for Xiao Tuanzi to recover all of its strength, especially when the person Luo Qingtong had summoned almost sucked Xiao Tuanzi dry. That was even more impossible. MHM. Luo Qingtong nodded. She told Little Pig about her current location and the abandoned continent. Then, she asked, if that's the case, how much can the heart of the continent help it recover? That's hard to say. Little Pig frowned and said with some hesitation. According to what you said, the heart of the continent shouldn't have any power of the Great Tao left. But it strangely gave birth to the Skynet grass, the Great Tao spirit, and the spirit of the Great Tao. It's certain that there's a treasure that's giving birth to it. Otherwise, it's impossible for such a situation to occur. If that's the case, I'm not sure how much power Xiao Tuanzi can absorb after it goes in. After all, according to the previous decline of the abandoned continent, Xiao Tuanzi shouldn't be able to absorb any power. Luo Qingtong immediately understood what Little Pig was trying to tell her. In other words, how much power Xiao Tuanzi can absorb depends on how much influence that treasure has on the heart of the continent. Luo Qingtong understood Little Pig's meaning. The heart of the continent didn't have any effect on Xiao Tuanzi. But because of that possible treasure, the heart of the continent might be useful for Xiao Tuanzi's recovery, but he wasn't sure if it would be effective or how effective it would be. This was in line with Luo Qingtong's previous conjecture. When she saw the eruption of power from the heart of the continent, she had already noticed that the situation here was abnormal. From the looks of it, that was indeed the case. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes and quickly analyzed the current situation. But then, there was a problem. Did the Lien family of the Flying Star Planet and the Tianfeng Chu family, as the people who discovered the Tianluo grass here, know anything about the situation here? If they knew, the team they sent out was made up of the younger generation of the family. Moreover, he was a highly valued junior of Chu Lingfeng's family. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't seem to know about the situation here. If not for Luo Qingtong or Yi Qianxian, Chu Lingfeng, Lian Xingchen, and the others would have all died here. Moreover, based on the situation in the heart of the continent, the Tianfeng Chu family didn't seem to be able to easily enter the hole and leave. It was obvious that the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lien family of the Flying Star Planet were hiding something very important. And that was the discovery of the Tianluo grass. Chapter 2672. With that in mind, Luo Qingtong looked at Chu Jingyi and the others and asked, "Do you know what it was like when your family discovered the Skynet grass?" Chu Jingyi and the others froze when they heard Luo Qingtong's words. "Young Master Xiao Qi, what do you mean?" Chu Jingyi looked hesitant, as if he couldn't understand what Luo Qingtong meant. Lian Xingchen, on the other hand, reacted quickly. When Luo Qingtong spoke, he spoke in a deep voice. "Our family members came back and said that they found the Skynet grass on this continent. It's very rare. They told us to be prepared. Prepare to compete with the Tianfeng Chu family. Because both families found the Skynet grass, we can only compete fairly. In order not to attract attention, this fair competition can only be between the younger generation." As he spoke, he looked sharply at Luo Qingtong. "Young Master Xiao Qi, you should know that if it weren't for this excuse, our family members wouldn't have allowed us to come here and take the risk. The people of the Flying Star Lien family here were almost all the powerful juniors of the Flying Star Lien family. Lian Xingchen and the other top descendants were the cornerstones of the Lien family in the future. It was safe to say that if all of them died here, the Lien family of the Flying Star realm would suffer heavy losses. In the future, the Lien family would decline in the Flying Star field. It would take too much time and resources to cultivate another batch of powerful descendants. It would be impossible for them to compete with other families of the same level. Other families wouldn't wait for the Lien family's descendants to grow stronger. Therefore, the consequences were not something that the Lien family of the Flying Star sector could afford. That was why they had arranged so many guards around their juniors. The Tianfeng Chu family was the same. If it weren't for the safety of their juniors, they wouldn't have gone to Heaven Wind Mercenary City and hired mercenaries to protect them. In this way, the two families wouldn't have deliberately hidden the truth, because they wouldn't risk the safety of their juniors and the future of their families. Therefore, there were only two possibilities. First, the Chu and Lien families didn't know the true situation of the heart of the continent. The second possibility was that someone had deliberately misled them and had their people spread fake news so that the upper echelons of the Chu and Lien family would think that the situation here was nothing more than that. However, no matter what, it proved that the Chu clan and the Lien clan did not understand the situation here. Therefore, they no longer had a chance to contact the experts of the Chu and Lien families who were guarding outside. As expected, at Luo Qingtong's question, everyone activated the emergency communication tools they had with their families. This tool was given to them by their families so that they could notify their families for help when there was a change in the situation. Of course, the dangers during normal training didn't count it. Since they had all come here, their lives and deaths were up to fate. It was impossible for the family to come and save everyone if something happened to them. Even if something happened to Chu Lingfeng, it would still be the same. That was why Chu Yuqing had been so fearless when Chu Lingfeng had been surrounded and attacked. Chapter 2673. Besides, Chu Lingfeng was stubborn. Even if he was besieged and his family elders told him not to use it because of the dangers of the training, he would never use it. Generally, when they were used, there would be a huge change in the abandoned continent. At that time, the people of the Heavenly Wind Shu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan, who were guarding outside, would enter this abandoned continent on a large scale and bring their disciples out. However, no matter how hard they tried to activate their communication devices, they couldn't get any response. It was as if they were throwing mud into the ocean. By now, the people from the Flying Star Lien clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan knew that something big must have happened when they came to the abandoned continent to train and obtain the Skynet grass. Their families wouldn't have sent them here, even though they knew that they were being sent to their deaths. It was obvious that they had been deceived in some way. It can't be the people who came to investigate the Skynet grass on the abandoned continent, Lian Xingxing said solemnly. That's right. It was impossible that both families had sent people to investigate. The two families were thousands of miles apart. They weren't even in the same galaxy. Who would target both families at the same time? That was impossible. Then there was only one possibility. The signs of the Sky Luo grass that the two families saw were incomplete. At that moment, the people from the Heavenly Wind Chu clan regained their senses. Chu Qiankong and the others said, "We know a little about the abandoned continent." The Heavenly Wind Chu clan was the first to discover the Heavenly Net Grass. Later, it was discovered by the Lien clan of the Flying Star Realm. Both sides sent the news back to their families. The people who discovered the Skynet grass were from our second elder's side. They were my uncle. He came back and told us that the Skynet grass was found on the abandoned continent. At the time, the heart of the continent was exposed. The people from the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan were stunned when they heard Chu Qiankong's words. But now, the heart of the continent is clearly hidden deep underground. A disciple from the Flying Star Lien clan blurted out. That's right. The heart of the continent is currently hidden deep underground. But the heart of the continent changes every time. That doesn't mean anything, Chu Qiankong said. No, that's not right. Lian Xingchen narrowed his eyes. Even if the location of the heart of the continent is constantly changing, it shouldn't be exposed. Because that means the heart of the continent will be completely defenseless. If I'm not wrong, our two families didn't encounter any obstacles in the process of discovering the Tianluo grass. At that time, I thought it was because this was an abandoned continent and the heart of the continent was almost useless. That's why they didn't encounter any danger. I'm sure the clan thinks the same. But now it seems, Luo Qingtong interrupted him, something must have happened in the heart of the continent. It's very likely that it's the key to the birth of the Heavenly Net Grass, the Tao Spirit, and these spirit beasts. As Luo Qingtong spoke, She narrowed her eyes and looked at the spiritual beasts that were approaching them amidst the continuous howls. Chapter 2674. Some of them were hiding in caves in the mountains, while others were hiding in forests and rivers. Regardless of which one they were hiding in, all of them were converging towards Luo Qingtong's group from all directions. Their eyes were dark, and their claws were cold and sharp. Their saliva mixed with their low growls as they glared at Luo Qingtong's group. Behind them, the remaining 6 spirit beasts were chasing after Chu Yuqing and the rest of the group from the cave's entrance. The latter's group was in an extremely sorry state, because they had been a step too late. When Luo Qingtong's group had rushed out of the cave, Chu Yuqing's group hadn't made it in time and had been attacked by the remaining 6 spirit beasts. If not for the fact that Luo Qingtong's group had taken some time to kill the 4 spirit beasts, Chu Yuqing's group would have been killed. Not only that, but because the 4 spirit beasts had been killed, the 6 spirit beasts had slowed down in their pursuit of Chu Yuqing, giving them a chance to rush out of the cave. Chu Yuqing's group would have all died here. But even so, their losses weren't light. Almost half of the guards had been killed by the 6 spirit beasts. Chu Yuqing's group had scrambled out of the cave. When they reached Luo Qingtong's group, Chu Yuqing gave her a backhanded slap, almost sending her flying out of the group. "Slut, it's all your fault." At this moment, Chu Yuqing's face was dark with anger and hatred. If not for Chu Ku's group questioning Luo Qingtong's decision, they wouldn't have ended up in this state. Chu Yuqing had already forgotten that he had also questioned Luo Qingtong's decision. Otherwise, how could Chu Ku's words have influenced him? But Chu Yuqing wouldn't admit it. He would only push the blame onto Chu Ku, who told her to shout the loudest. How could Chu Yuqing admit his own incompetence? Naturally, she could only blame Chu Ku. Chu Ku had just escaped from the claws of those spirit beasts, but before she could even react, she was sent flying by Chu Yuqing's slap. She covered her face and didn't make a sound for a long time. She was so close to falling out of the team. How could this be? She looked blankly at Luo Qingtong, who was surrounded by people. Beside the latter were Chu Lingfeng, Lian Xingchen, and the white-masked man. He was just a weak young mercenary from God knows where. She didn't even have the strength of an exalt, but at this moment, under the contrast of the other party's lineup, she seemed to be the absolute center of the 2 groups. He was cherished by the leaders of the 2 teams, the young masters of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. She, the 3rd miss of the Tianfeng Chu family, was the one who should have enjoyed such treatment. However, she was treated like a stray dog. This just what was going on. Chu Yufei stood not far from her, her hair disheveled. When she saw this scene, a trace of hatred and jealousy flashed across her face. The treatment Luo Xiaoqi was receiving right now was truly infuriating. Fortunately, she was a man. Otherwise, Chu Yufei and Chu Ku probably wouldn't have been able to bear such a blow. While their hearts were filled with hatred and jealousy, Luo Qingtong looked around at the scene and frowned. She was certain that something strange had happened in the heart of the continent. Chapter 2675. But no matter what it was at this moment, they could only rely on themselves. They looked at the spirit beasts that were constantly approaching them. In the distance, there were even sharper roars of beasts. And Luo Qingtong even saw that in the distance, in the places where the decaying spirit energy did not cover, there were faintly discernible, transparent figures that appeared and disappeared. Obviously, these were the spirits of the great path that had retreated before. At this moment, they were all gathered in this cave. It was also because of the decaying spirit energy lingering around Luo Qingtong and the others that they couldn't get close. And these decaying spirit energy were drawn in by Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others. No one knew what method they used. The decaying spirit energy was almost guided by them, passing through the places where the living spirit energy was pervasive. It didn't disperse for a long time, lingering around Luo Qingtong and the others. It was also because of the existence of these decaying spirit energy that Luo Qingtong and the others were so calm when they were walking in the cave, and the spirits of the Great Path didn't dare to disturb them. At this moment, after these spirit beasts appeared, the spirits of the Great Path appeared. Roar! The roars of the spirits of the Great Path and the spirit beasts rose and fell one after another, making everyone indescribably flustered. These two things could be said to complement each other and were completely a great weapon against people. The spirits of the Great Path almost ignored all attacks, and the spirit beasts were not afraid of the decaying spirit energy. Once these two attacked at the same time, the consequences would be unimaginable. The people of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Flying Star Lian family thought, and suddenly their faces became very ugly. Luo Qingtong's complexion was fine. She had Yi Qianxian by her side. If this man couldn't handle it, he would inevitably make a sound. At this moment, the man's hand tightly around her waist was steady and strong, without the slightest fluctuation in the posture of tightening. Thinking about it, he should be able to handle it. But even if Yi Qianxian could handle it, Luo Qingtong couldn't ignore Chu Lingfeng and the others. This man still didn't know her identity. If something happened, he would definitely only protect her. What about Chu Lingfeng, Gu Yifeng, and the others? Even if Luo Qingtong revealed her identity, at most, Yi Qianxian would be able to save Chu Lingfeng. Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to let him take Gu Yifeng and the others away. Moreover, Luo Qingtong didn't know if this would worsen his injuries and worsen the damage to Yi Qianxian's meridians. Therefore, she would not ask Yi Qianxian to do this unless she had no other choice. But at the same time, she couldn't watch Gu Yifeng and the others die. When she was in the Red Flame mercenary group, he took care of her a lot. If it weren't for their care, she wouldn't have been able to live so smoothly in Heaven's Wind mercenary city. In the beginning, Chu Xiaofeng had kept her by his side because of Gu Yifeng and the others. She had received a lot of care from them, so she had to return the favor. If there was nothing she could do, it would be fine. Naturally, she would first protect herself and Chu Lingfeng. But now wasn't the time to be forced into such a situation? As Luo Qingtong thought this, her eyes suddenly became conflicted. If nothing unexpected happened, her identity wouldn't be able to be hidden anymore. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian didn't have the time to settle the score with her. Sob, 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 what the hell? Chapter 2676. Luo Qingtong had planned to tell Yi Qianxian her identity at that time and appease him. Even if that man was angry, he wouldn't be too angry now. The appearance of these great Tao spirits and spirit beasts turned her thoughts into ashes. If her identity was exposed at this time, she could imagine how angry that man would be. No, she had to hold on as long as she could. While Luo Qingtong was struggling in her heart, Yi Qianxian could feel how tense the body of the person in his arms was, how guilty she looked, and how she kept peeking at him without looking sideways. Luo Qingtong probably didn't know that every time she faced him, she would look at him like this. Although she did it every time without leaving any trace. But Yi Qianxian was used to being tricked by her. How could he not notice it? Even if he didn't notice it before, he had already been trained by her. Seeing her gaze, he immediately snorted coldly and didn't speak. He knew that this woman was worried that her identity would be exposed. After all, the appearance of these great Tao spirits and spirit beasts was not simple. Thinking of what he had sensed before, the tyrannical power that didn't seem to erupt from the heart of the continent of an abandoned continent at all, Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked at the heart of the continent. There was something in it. There is something in the heart of the continent, he said to Luo Qingtong in a deep voice. His voice was so low that only Luo Qingtong could hear it. It's a world within a world, and the Tianluo grass is also inside. If we seize the things inside, we may be able to make these spirit beasts and great Tao spirits listen to us, or retreat. Hearing Yi Qianxian's words, Luo Qingtong also nodded. That's right. Now, this was the only path they could take. However, although Luo Qingtong also saw through this, she didn't expect Yi Qianxian to tell her. Was Luo Xiaoqi's identity so pleasing to him? Or could it be that as long as it was related to her, this man would treat her differently? For some reason, Luo Qingtong's heart suddenly felt sweet and warm. This man was overbearing, narrow-minded, arrogant, and jealous. He also liked to control her. Every time he got angry, it was bigger than the sky. Although he was overbearing, he was willing to work hard to restrain himself for her. Although he was narrow-minded, he was willing to learn to be tolerant for her. He was childish because he loved her and jealous because he didn't want anyone to get close to her. He cared about her because he wanted her to be by his side at all times. Every time he got angry, he would be as angry as the sky, but he would never hurt her. His strength was tyrannical, and his prestige was unparalleled. Luo Qingtong was also a supreme king of the 24th century, so the pride in her heart was not inferior to his. However, she was willing to restrain the arrogance in her heart for him and learn to rely on and love him. Luo Qingtong had thought that she would never find someone who was willing to make her fall in love with him, who would make her restrain her domineering aura and bow her head to him. However, after meeting Yi Qianxian, she realized that all this was not so difficult. As long as you could meet a man who always cared about you, respected you, loved you, and let you override all his pride and principles, it would be enough. Yi Qianxian could break all his dignity and pride for her. Why couldn't she bow her head and act coquettishly for him? Men also needed a sense of security, especially Yi Qianxian, who was overbearing and narrow-minded. Luo Qingtong chuckled as she thought of this. In fact, she quite liked Yi Qianxian's appearance when he was nervous and angry about her, but couldn't do anything to her. This made her feel that she was cherished and cared for. Especially when that man was flustered and exasperated, well, she admitted that she was probably a fake wife. Chapter 2677. The heart of the continent had the most spirit beasts. There were almost layers upon layers of them, from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain. Powerful spirit beasts occupied every spot on the mountain. It was almost impossible to rush from where Luo Qingtong and the others were. In fact, it might even lead to a dead end. But after seeing Luo Qingtong's order, even though Chu Kuo was gnashing her teeth in hatred, she didn't dare to say anything more. Since she didn't say anything, Chu Yuqing and the others naturally didn't refute Luo Qingtong's words. After all, it was because they hadn't listened to Luo Qingtong that they'd hesitated for a moment that they hadn't been able to walk out of the hole. At this moment, it was clear that Luo Qingtong was the leader of these two groups. If Chu Lingfeng and Lian Xingchen were willing to listen to Luo Qingtong, then there was no need to mention the White Mask Man. In this way, practically all three groups listened to Luo Qingtong. Chu Yuqing and the others' objections weren't actually objections at all. In fact, it might even lead to their deaths. In that case, it was better to just follow the main group. Chu Yuqing and the others had almost been scared out of their wits by how they'd courted death. The expressions of the elite guards following them were extremely unfriendly. If they didn't listen to Luo Qingtong, they'd abandon them and leave with Luo Qingtong and the others. After all, they'd suffered far too many casualties protecting Chu Yuqing and the others. Even if they'd signed an agreement with the Tianfeng Chu clan, how could an agreement be more important than their lives? Every time Luo Qingtong made a decision, it seemed dangerous, but reality proved that she'd always been right. Moreover, she'd always led them out of danger. As a result, these elite guards wouldn't listen to Chu Yuqing and the others this time. Fortunately, Chu Yuqing and the others didn't continue to court death. Without their discordant voices, the atmosphere in the group was unusually harmonious and cohesive. Breaking out of the encirclement in the direction of the heart of the continent is indeed the best way. Lian Xingchen said in a deep voice. His judgment of the surrounding situation was not as detailed as Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, but this did not prevent him from seeing the basic situation. Their communication devices did not respond at all, which meant that it was impossible for them to be rescued by the experts of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. But if he were to retreat through the hole, if this trick had worked, Luo Qingtong wouldn't have rushed in with them. Thus, they could only charge forward. The heart of the continent was their only hope. No matter how these Dao spirits and spirit beasts appeared, it had to be related to the heart of the continent. Their only chance of survival was there. There was nothing wrong with Luo Qingtong's decision. Besides, the spirit beasts were heavily guarded, and they even set up such tight defenses around the heart of the continent. No matter how one looked at it, the heart of the continent was their weak spot. "Let's go," Lian Xingchen said in a deep voice. He waved the long sword in his hand, then gestured with his left hand. In an instant, countless streaks of starlight gathered in his left hand, condensing into a long sword that flickered with starlight. Condensing stars into swords was the Flying Star Lian clan's top cultivation technique. It was an important characteristic of the astral art, and it also possessed great destructive power. The long sword condensed by the stars had been nurtured by the disciples of the Lian family of the Flying Star sector with their own aura and strength for years. Chapter 26-78. With the blood of the Flying Star Lian family's younger brothers, the battle power will increase by several times. The drawbacks are very obvious. Due to the blood condensation, the sword will be broken or damaged, and the foundation will be severely damaged. The realm will regress, and the damage will take a long time to recover. Therefore, unless there are special circumstances, the Flying Star Lian family will use this star sword. Enough to rush into Lu Lian stars, but Hao uses this star sword. The Flying Star Lian family's younger brothers use this star sword in their bodies one after another. In an instant, starlight burst forth, and the brilliance of the stars shone brightly. The Flying Star Lian family's younger brothers hold two swords, and their eyes are cold. The Lian family's star robe is shining. The Flying Star Lian family summons the Star Sword family's edge color is very serious. The Flying Star Lian family actually hides a powerful ultimate move. Everyone looks at each other. Qian Kong, Yuan Hong, Jing Yi, and the others all roar. In an instant, their bodies are swollen, and their veins are exposed. The veins are exposed, as if something is breaking through the skin.
Boom, boom, boom.
Pieces of armor-like things emerge from the bodies of the family's younger brothers, forming the appearance of armor. Flesh and blood armor. Family secret. Only the family's younger brothers can cultivate the hidden ultimate move. The attack and defense of the family's younger brothers are increased. Ordinary attacks can't penetrate the armor. There is no difference between the Dangua breaking armor field and the Flying Star Lian family's star sword breaking armor. If it is light, the realm will regress, and if it is heavy, the foundation will be damaged, and the method will continue to advance. Because they know that Lu Ji and the others are the key to survival, the family no longer dares to hide and transform into armor. Its Ling armor is the most shocking. The armor is completely black, and sharp bone spikes appear on the armor's arms and back and elbows. It's like a killing machine. The armor's luster is darker and shinier, as if it's real armor. It highlights the valiance of Ling's bloodline. After all, the armor condensed by he is simpler and cruder than the armor condensed by Yuan Hong, Yu Qing, and the other family's younger brothers. The family members condensed their armor, and the mercenaries and top-notch guards successively used their own ultimate moves. Chapter 26-79. Let's go. Luo Qingtong's eyes slightly condensed. She took Fu Yuqing and other thousand silkworms silk thread, almost transparent silk thread jade purity, forgetting how the silk thread failed to save the most. Luo Qingtong Lingho Luo successfully made the move to retreat immediately, giving her a reaction to succeed. This woman used the move to deal with the spirit beast, knowing that the spirit beast's keen sense of smell is extremely powerful. Only this spirit intelligence loses. Luo is afraid of repeating the Same trick. Yuching held back his sarcasm when his mouth was cut off. His eyes widened, seeing Luo Qingtong's silk thread fluttering, extremely afraid of speed and the slightest gap, flying around Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud, without any hindrance or trace. What's even more surprising is that Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud and surround the silk thread completely. It's simple. Gui Yuching and other fruits are like Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud. Silk thread shroud, the circle shroud. The great doubt formed by the silk thread scattered the decaying spirits around the silk thread shroud. Don't let the spirit get close to the spirit beast for fear that the spirit will be killed. Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud every surrounding body shroud, but circle shroud several circles due to the volume of the circle. The circles formed and offset each other, fanning out any decaying spirits. Only this silk thread passed through the team, actually touching anything. It's simply incredible. Luo Qingtong how can control the silk thread touch? Knowing that Zhou Liangqi burst like a knife. Every Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud touch a bit. Immediately, the silk thread shroud tangled. Luo Qingtong forcefully juggling blade sits, as if she knows all about the situation and the strengths and weaknesses of the Zhou Liangqi burst. Yuqing's incredible scene is almost numb. The words stuck in his throat almost choked him to death. Ridicule. Ridicule. Ho Shun slaps his face. Luo is simply a monster. Ho Yuqing finally knew that Luo Qingtong saved Ling Shroud Yun even more underestimate the enemy. She is indeed. Even if she let the prepared Luo Qingtong save Ling Shroud again, it's still easy. The youth is really afraid of the extreme. Chapter 2680. On the other hand, Yi Qianren looked at Luo Qingtong with raised eyebrows. She thought, this woman finally can't keep up the act? Let's see how long she can last. Your method of controlling the threads is rather peculiar, he said slowly to Luo Qingtong.
Ha ha.
Luo Qingtong laughed dryly. Naturally, she'd used her ice sorcery to achieve this. But if Luo Qingtong didn't say anything, no one would know. This was the best she could do. If it still didn't work, then she'd have no choice but to reveal her identity. At that time, this man wouldn't speak to her so gently. As Luo Qingtong thought this, the corners of her lips twitched. She could almost hear this man's exasperated roar. Luo Qi. She only hoped that this time, they'd be able to reach the heart of the continent smoothly. Mommy, please delay the exposure of my identity for a little while longer. Please don't come as fiercely as a storm. Luo Qingtong prayed in her heart. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian didn't say anything else after saying this.
Whoosh.
He hugged Luo Qingtong's waist tightly with both hands. With a flick of his sleeves, his entire body shot forward like an arrow.
Boom.
When he leaped up, the other members of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan and the Chu family of the Heavenly Wind clan all took action. Chu Yuqing, who'd been paying attention to Luo Qingtong's threads, realized that his understanding of Luo Qingtong was still far from the upper limit. The threads seemed to have a mind of their own, following their movements. Almost at the same time as their figures rushed forward, the threads all moved in response. It must be known that everyone's speed was different. Some were fast, some were slow, some were tall, some were short. Even the aura of power that burst forth from their bodies was different. This difference was something that even they themselves could not detect, let alone control. However, Luo Qingtong was able to detect their outburst of strength in advance and take into account their speed and height. This was simply terrifying. The silk threads controlled by Luo Qingtong surrounded them like a protector, but didn't hinder their movements. They didn't need to worry about the existence of these threads at all. They didn't need to worry about disturbing the operation of these threads, which would limit their speed and attacks. Because those threads were like living creatures, they would automatically avoid them. Was this Luo Xiaoqi a demon or an immortal? Or a god? Chu Yuqing had never seen such an inconceivable thing before. In that instant, Luo Qingtong's move stunned him. It was the same for Chu Ku'er, Chu Yufei, and the others. They were also disdainful of Luo Qingtong's action of taking out the silk thread. It was only because they had been taught a lesson before that they didn't dare to speak again. However, The disdain and mockery in their hearts didn't lessen at all. They felt that Luo Qingtong's actions were nothing more than sensationalism. What kind of protection could her actions provide? However, at that moment, seeing Luo Qingtong skillfully taking everyone into her protection, their expressions finally changed. Luo Qingtong's actions could already be called a divine skill. Perhaps even the sky martial arts realm experts who could see through the changes of the world's origin energy wouldn't dare say that they could do what Luo Qingtong did. As for the sky martial arts realm, what kind of valiant and unattainable strength and realm was that? Chu Yufei, and the others simply couldn't imagine it. After all, the strongest person in their Tianfeng Chu clan Master Chu, was only comparable to the earth martial arts realm. And this was because the power of his bloodline was strong, far surpassing that of ordinary cultivators. Chapter 2681. While Chu Yuqing, Chu Ku and the others' expressions changed drastically, Luo Qingtong's team collided with a herd of spirit beasts in the direction of the heart of the continent. Those spirit beasts howled one after another and pounced on them. The Tianfeng Chu family immediately stepped forward under Chu Lingfeng's lead. Chu Lingfeng, who was covered in black armor, looked like a grim reaper from hell. With a wave of his hand, he blocked a huge spirit beast that leaped over. Then there were 2 more, 3 more, 5 more. A total of 5 spirit beasts bit Chu Lingfeng in an instant. The other Tianfeng Chu family members were also bitten by 1 or 2 spirit beasts in an instant. However, Chu Lingfeng could not withstand as many spirit beasts as he could. Because he was standing at the front of the team, he was like the sharpest and heaviest knife that was inserted in the vanguard position. If those spirit beasts wanted to pounce on the Tianfeng Chu family members behind him, they could not avoid Chu Lingfeng. However, this would roar. With a furious roar, Chu Lingfeng's hands tore apart 2 spirit beasts. As for the other 2 spirit beasts that were biting onto his legs, they were also kicked away by him. The sharp bone spurs on his knees directly pierced the bellies of the 2 spirit beasts. The last spirit beast bit Chu Lingfeng's neck, but Chu Lingfeng hit it with his head. It fell to the ground with a whimper, and its skull was crushed by Chu Lingfeng's foot. Roar. Following Chu Lingfeng's roar, the other Tianfeng Chu family members also blocked the attacks of the spirit beasts in front of them. Then, with a whoosh, Lian Xingqian and the others' long swords were mixed with the swords in their left hands, and they attacked together. In an instant, the spirit beasts blocked by the Tianfeng Chu family members were all killed. While they were killing these spirit beasts, blood-red howls sounded one after another from behind them. Everyone's expressions changed slightly. Only then did they remember that they were not only facing spirit beasts from one direction. Spirit beasts from other directions were also urgently waiting to attack. And those were just ordinary disciples who might not be able to block them. Just as their expressions changed slightly, Yi Zichen's expression changed slightly. Roar. Mournful cries of spirit beasts suddenly rang out, followed by the sound of large amounts of blood and heavy objects falling to the ground. Everyone turned around and saw that in the originally unguarded area behind them, invisible threads mixed with blood were rapidly spinning in the air. It turned out that when they were attacking, Luo Qingtong had promptly retracted the protective threads in front of them and added them to the rear. The spirit beasts that were pouncing at the rear were all cut into pieces by these threads. In the other directions, Luo Qingtong's threads also achieved brilliant results. Her threads cooperated with the attacks of the ordinary disciples and the group of mercenaries to firmly guard the other directions except where Lian Xingqian and the others were. Luo Qingtong's threads could be used to attack and defend. When the ordinary disciples attacked, she defended them and prevented the spirit beasts from getting close. When they recovered from their defense, she attacked. Chapter 2682. Roar. After the invisible threads in Luo Qingtong's hands pierced through the limbs and bones of the spirit beasts, They were like marionettes pulling strings. They gathered the bodies of the spirit beasts together. Roar! In Luo Qingtong's hands, the invisible threads were constantly intertwined and dancing in her hands. Boom, boom, boom. The spirit beasts that were pierced by her threads immediately moved uncontrollably and rushed toward the other spirit beasts that were pouncing toward Luo Qingtong and the others. The two sides were fighting fiercely. The spirit beasts that were rushing toward Luo Qingtong and the others were suddenly intercepted halfway. They didn't know what was going on and could only fight back instinctively. However, they couldn't tell which spirit beasts were their enemies and which weren't. Therefore, they could only attack randomly. At this moment, the spirit beasts were in chaos. This was what Lian Xingqian and the others saw when they turned around. They thought that the spirit beasts might be attacked from the back and the left and right, but the scene in front of them was clearly that the spirit beasts were killing each other. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others who were following Luo Qingtong didn't even make a move. Go, don't stop. Keep going. Luo Qingtong leaned on Yi Qianxian and didn't notice that the man was holding her tighter and tighter. Her 5 fingers were constantly shaking. With her current energy, she could at most ensure that the spirit beasts at the back wouldn't rush over. However, the spirit beasts on the left and right might not be able to stop all of them. Moreover, they could at most hold on for less than 15 minutes. Fortunately, Bei Qing and Feng Yu were here to fill in the gaps. There shouldn't be a problem. When Luo Qingtong's voice sounded, Lian Xingqian and the others came back to their senses. He took a deep look at Luo Qingtong and then said to Chu Qiankong and the others, "The Tianfeng Chu family is very lucky." He was surprised to find a treasure like Luo Xiaoqi as his guard. Lian Xingqian was certain that if it weren't for Luo Qingtong, the chances of them making it out alive would be less than 30%. The remaining 30% were the experts of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan who had sensed the anomaly on their side in time and came to their rescue. Otherwise, it wouldn't even be 10%. Unlike now, they only cared about cutting through the enemy like a sharp knife. As for the rear and left sides, there was not the slightest bit of worry. There was not even the slightest bit of worry? Awesome. After saying this, he directly slashed away a spirit beast that was charging at him. Then, he raised his voice and said to Luo Qingtong with a bright smile, "Luo Qingtong, if we can go back alive today, you can come to the Lian family of the Flying Star if you have any difficulties in the future. I will do my best to solve your problems." As he spoke, his gaze swept over Chu Qiankong, Chu Yuqing, and the others. The meaning of his words was self-evident. Obviously, he wanted Luo Qingtong to come to the Lian family of the Flying Star if Chu Yuqing, Chu Qiankong, and the others try to harm her again. At that time, they would naturally stand up for her. This was both to repay a debt of gratitude and to recruit her. Luo Qingtong smiled faintly. On the other hand, Chu Yuqing and the others' expressions were abnormally ugly. Wasn't Lian Xingqian implying that they were as blind as a bat? They didn't even know how to recruit a monster like Luo Xiaoqi. Instead, they wanted to take advantage of them. Chu Jingyi glared at Chu Yuqing and the others, then said to Lian Xingqian, "Luo Xiaoqi is close to our young master. Young Master Lian, you don't need to have any ideas about her." His words were very obvious. Luo Xiaoqi was their young master's woman, so the Lian family of the Flying Star Lian clan shouldn't have any ideas about her. Chapter 2683. Puffed. Hearing Lian Xingqian's words, Luo Qingtong, who had been smiling silently, almost choked. What kind of ambiguous words were Lian Xingqian saying? She still had a jealous man by her side. Chu Jingyi and the others were also dumbfounded. They didn't expect Lian Xingqian to say something like that. But then again, young Master Lian wasn't inferior to their young master at all, no. It wasn't just not bad. Apart from talent, everything else was far ahead of the rest. His young master had been left behind by more than a few streets. Chu Jingyi felt a toothache at the thought of this. He felt that he had opened a door for the Lian family's young master to poach her. What if the Lian family's young master seduced Luo Xiaoqi with his beauty? Their young master was too simple-minded to be a match for the other party. Chu Jingyi and the others' lips twitched at the thought of this. Luo Qingtong's lips were twitching even more than theirs. These people were really trying to kill her. Be serious. I can only hold on for 15 minutes at most. We have to charge into the heart of the continent in that time. Otherwise, we won't be able to withstand the counterattack of those spirit beasts. By then, even Yi Qianxian and the others would be able to save her. The Flying Star Lian family and the Tianfeng Chu family might not be able to escape. Luo Qingtong's words made Lian Xingqian and Chu Jingyi's expressions turn serious. 15 minutes? Lian Xingqian glanced at Luo Qingtong. The latter nodded with an indifferent expression. 15 minutes. But now, there's less than 15 minutes left. The moment Luo Qingtong used the threads to pierce those spirit beasts, the time had already begun.
All right.
Lian Xingqian nodded at Luo Qingtong, then said to the Lian family members and their top guards, "Let's go. We'll charge to the right. You guys charge to the left," he said to the Tianfeng Chu family. As for the middle lane, there was no need to worry about it. Chu Lingfeng was at the front, while Yi Qianxian and the others were guarding Luo Qingtong in the middle. Attacking from 3 directions simultaneously was the fastest way to break through when there was nothing to worry about from the left, right, and rear.
Boom.
Led by Lian Xingqian, the people of the Flying Star Lian family and the Tianfeng Chu family unleashed 200% of their combat power and broke through the barrier rapidly. The large group of spirit beasts that were charging towards them were all cut up by them in batches. They circled from the front left and the front right and finally met up with Chu Lingfeng, who was right in front. A large number of spirit beasts died under their swords and palms. Like a sharp sword, everyone rushed towards the peak of the mountain in front of them. When the spirit beasts saw that they were getting closer and closer to the heart of the continent, their roars became even more deafening. Behind them, countless spirit beasts were chasing after them. Almost all of them came from all directions of the cave world. At that moment, these spirit beasts were running with all their might towards the team. Luo Qingtong's fingers moved continuously, using the threads to guide the spirit beasts. She kept causing them to fall into a state of mutual destruction, delaying their pursuit. If someone were to look down from the sky at this moment, they would realize that the entire mountain range was densely covered by countless spirit beasts. Chapter 2684. Once they stopped, the huge wave formed by the spirit beasts behind them would completely devour them. 100 meters, 50 meters, 40 meters. Luo Qingtong and the others were getting closer and closer to the heart of the continent. Roar! Finally, some spirit beasts broke through the protection of Luo Qingtong's silk threads and rushed into the group.
Kill.
Yi Qianxian's eyes were cold as he waved his sleeve. Bang!
Bang. Bang.
Countless violent explosions sounded. In an instant, the bodies of the spirit beasts were smashed into minced meat by Bei Qing and Feng Yu's attacks. However, their attacks were mixed with the attacks of the mercenaries and ordinary disciples, so no one noticed them and knew that they were the culprits. Otherwise, some of the mercenaries and ordinary disciples would have died. After all, they were not strong enough to fight against these spirit beasts. At this moment, perhaps because Luo Qingtong and the others were getting closer to the heart of the continent, the spirit beasts that rushed out were all at LV9 of the human martial realm. If not for Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others, they would have died. With the strength of Lian Xingqian, Chu Lingfeng, and the others, they would have suffered heavy losses. Not to mention that he was still able to charge forward like this. However, the battle was so intense that no one noticed that. Moreover, no one knew that the strength that Bei Qing and Feng Yu had revealed had already surpassed the strength of a cultivator of the 9th level of the human martial layer.
Boom. Boom. Boom.
The blood of countless spirit beasts splashed. The 1,000 silkworms' threads in Luo Qingtong's hands were not enough. However, she did not retract them. After all, her silk threads could not stop the high-level spirit beasts, but they could stop the large number of ordinary spirit beasts. The number of spirit beasts gathered together was enough to overturn rivers and seas. Let's go. Let's charge over. Seeing that the group was only 20 meters away from the heart of the continent, Luo Qingtong wanted them to continue in one go. Roar! An extremely violent roar came from the front. Then, the crowd saw a spiritual beast lying on the ground, its body twitching violently. Above its body, a huge transparent figure seemed to be entering its body. Not good. It's those great Tao spirits. Lian Xingqian glanced over and shouted, "They're merging with the spiritual beasts. We cannot let them succeed." When the spirit beasts pounced on Luo Qingtong and the others, the great Tao spirits also pounced on them. However, because Luo Qingtong and the others were constantly surrounded by the decaying spirit qi, they simply couldn't get close to them. As for Lian Xing and the others, their stellar swords were able to condense and disperse at will. Thus, they were able to easily kill them. As long as they came into contact with even the slightest bit of decaying spiritual qi, they wouldn't be able to completely conceal themselves in the midst of life's spiritual qi and would be killed by the Lian clan members. Over time, they no longer dared to approach. Unexpectedly, they were all condensing together at this moment. Luo Qingtong and the others watched as the great Tao spirits merged into the spirit beast's body. How could they not know that this would greatly increase the spirit beast's strength? However, there was no way for them to stop it now. The spirit beast was at the back of the group, close to the edge of the heart of the continent. No one noticed the changes on its side. Chapter 2685. Roar! The spirit beast roared violently, and its bones creaked violently. Its fur, flesh, and bones were all expanding violently. In the blink of an eye, its body had grown more than 10 times larger than before. Its entire body had changed greatly. The ferocious and ruthless aura around him was incomparably fierce and sharp. Earth Martial Arts Realm. Lian Xingqian and the others were more knowledgeable than ordinary people. They could tell at a glance that the spirit beast's aura had skyrocketed. Their faces immediately turned pale. Roar! Following the roar of the spirit beast, the entire cave world began to tremble violently. Lian Xingqian and the others were about 20 meters away from the heart of the continent when the spirit beast roared fiercely. Immediately, they lost their balance and were all blasted back by the huge force contained in the roar. Puffed! All of them coughed out a mouthful of blood. In an instant, their faces turned as pale as paper. All of them had been injured by the roar. Earth Martial Arts Realm. So powerful. Lian Xingqian and the others were horrified. They had never seen an expert above the Earth Martial Arts realm make a move before. They didn't know that the power of the attack would be so terrifying. A single roar was enough to injure them. Wouldn't all of them be torn to shreds by the time it made its move? Even the top guards at LV9 of the human martial arts realm had ugly looks on their faces. They saw it more clearly than Lian Xingqian and the others. This spirit beast wasn't as simple as having just entered the Earth martial arts realm. Such a powerful roar not only injured Lian Xingqian and the others, but also caused their qi and blood to churn violently. They couldn't condense their qi and blood in a short period of time. What did it mean to be unable to condense their qi and blood? It meant that they had no power to fight back in front of this spirit beast. Being suppressed so obviously, this spirit beast was definitely not in the Earth martial arts realm or a low-level Earth martial arts realm. It should be very close to the middle level, which was LV4 of the Earth martial arts realm. Damn it, they discovered it too late. Otherwise, if they interrupted the fusion of those spirits of Tao and that spirit beast in time, this kind of thing would definitely not have happened. But who would have thought that the great Tao spirits could fuse with these spirit beasts? They didn't know anything about great Tao spirits. After all, it was something that only existed in legends. When the spirit beast roared, Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others flew back and stood guard beside Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. The power in their bodies was not affected in the slightest. It was just that no one knew about it at the moment. As they retreated, Luo Qingtong grabbed Yi Qianxian's hand. My dear moi, please don't be angry with me. I really didn't mean to hide my identity, but I really have my own difficulties. Well, we can't wash our dirty linen in public. No matter what you do when we get back, I'll accept any punishment, all right? Don't be angry now, please don't be angry. Be good. I'll treat your meridians. Chapter 2686. She didn't say it explicitly, but she believed that this man would understand. God knew that she had planned everything, but she didn't expect the mission of the heart of the continent to be so deceptive. Now that this spirit beast had suddenly mutated, Luo Qingtong wasn't sure if Yi Qianxian and the others could handle it. This man was injured, and Luo Qingtong absolutely couldn't let him take risks. He could only treat the injuries on his body first. But once she started to act, her identity would be exposed. Therefore, Luo Qingtong could only tell him everything. She only hoped that this man wouldn't be so angry that he wouldn't let her treat him. Luo Qingtong was so affectionate and cute. Yi Qianxian found it interesting, and there was an indescribable satisfaction in his eyes. He didn't know what she meant by affectionate and affectionate. Yi Qianxian didn't know what it meant, but he understood the word love very well. Was this woman saying that she loved him? Sure enough, she was born cunning. Every time she got into trouble, she would use sweet words to coax him. Did she think he was a 3-year-old child? Yi Qianxian thought so, and the curve between his eyebrows suddenly rose. There was also a faint smile at the corner of his lips. If it weren't for the white jade mask, such intense joy would almost burn people's eyes. He was as beautiful as jade and dazzling. Such words were not only used to describe women. Now Yi Qianxian's face was even more dazzling than the scorching sun in the sky. It could be said that he was handsome and dazzling. Humph. Luo Qingtong. Yi Qianxian's smile was dazzling, but the cold snort in his mouth didn't diminish at all. Before he could finish speaking, Luo Qingtong hurriedly said, Yes, I know. I lied to you. I know I was wrong. Good girl, let me treat your injuries first. By the way, remember to call me Luo Qi or Luo Xiaoqi. Don't call me by the wrong name, darling. You're in big trouble. Yi Qianxian was furious. His words were all stuffed back into his stomach by Luo Qingtong's words. Why was this woman so infuriating? She had said everything she needed to say. What did he say? Why didn't this woman play by the rules? Yi Qianxian gritted his teeth. He wanted to say something, but Luo Qingtong's power had already rushed into his body. As soon as Luo Qingtong's power entered his body, Luo Qingtong immediately felt the miserable state of his meridians. You man! This time, it was Luo Qingtong's turn to gnash her teeth. You were so badly injured, yet you still dared to attack. Thinking back to how Yi Qianxian had wantonly slaughtered his way through the abandoned continent, Luo Qingtong felt a burst of anger. Did this man take his body seriously at all? Humph, if someone hadn't hidden his identity, would I have ended up like this? Yi Qianxian gritted his teeth and whispered in her ear. This woman was so obedient when she bowed her head and admitted her mistake. Now, she immediately exposed her true nature and even dared to be fierce to him. Luo Qingtong was speechless for a while. It seemed that this was indeed her fault. That's not right. She didn't know his true identity at that time. She only found out later. Did this count? Luo Qingtong's lips twitched, but she still felt guilty and didn't refute. Chapter 2687. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong hurriedly changed the topic. Let me treat you. How did you end up like this? And the Shifeng dragon ring on your body, why is it gone? If she had the Shifeng dragon ring, she would not have missed this man at the beginning. And the latter hid his identity and face, so there must be some hidden reasons. Something happened. It's not good to take it with me, so I took it off. Yi Qianxian's face was indifferent, and he did not mention what happened in Tiandu. He did not want Luo Qingtong to worry. Naturally, he would deal with the matter over there. In any case, he would not let anyone hurt the woman in front of him. No one. And his life would not be at the mercy of others. Yes. Hearing Yi Qianxian's words, Luo Qingtong knew that he was hiding something. Did he not want her to know and worry her? Luo Qingtong did not say anything, but she kept this matter in her heart. The more Yi Qianxian did not say, the more it proved that it had something to do with that side. Thinking of what Elder Yu had told her about that side, Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes slightly. One day, she would make a trip there and see who was bullying her man. Heavenly vain body, short-lived body? Her man was naturally blessed with both good fortune and a long-lived and worry-free image. As for those people, they would all wait and see who would live longer in the end. She was afraid that they would not live past her time. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly, but the power in her body did not stop at all, and directly circulated in Yi Qianxian's body. As the power in her body flowed, the strength of Yi Qianxian's meridians was repaired little by little. The broken meridians before were not so tough. With a little force, the broken meridians could be retensioned and become tough again. The strength of Yi Qianxian's meridians was improving little by little. In the depths of his body, there was an enormous and terrifying power that could shatter the heavens and rend the earth. At this moment, when it sensed that his meridians were being repaired, it almost let out a joyous buzzing sound. If Yi Qianxian hadn't intentionally controlled it, the roars of dragons and tigers would have been heard. The power of its sound was probably even greater than that of the spirit beast from before. At this moment, the spirit beast had also completed its fusion. It abruptly flipped over and stood up, its feet stomping on the ground. Its entire body was still covered in blood from the forced enlargement of its body. However, his entire body had already leaped into the air in an instant. With a valiant aura that could tear through everything, he rushed towards Luo Qingtong and the others. Roar! Along with its wild roar, the people of the Flying Star Lian family and the Tianfeng Chu family, as well as the guards of the LV9 human martial realm, all of them were shaken to the point that their faces turned pale. The qi and blood in their bodies were surging, and they could not summon any strength to fight back. Their faces were filled with despair. They had never thought that they would fail at the final step, even though they had almost reached the final step. The strength of this mutated spirit beast was too strong for them to deal with. They had already closed their eyes in despair and were ready to die. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others frowned. They looked at each other and were ready to take action. With their strength, even if they were sealed, it was not difficult to deal with this spirit beast. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.